In today's video, I'm going to talk a little bit more about certifications. So I've been getting a lot of questions on social media about certifications recently, so I'm going to answer some of them here. Now, I think I told you in yesterday's video that I've been commenting on a post on LinkedIn, and just to give a little background on where these questions are coming from. So, like I said, it's from a post on LinkedIn, and at first, I think I told you in yesterday's video that the person was saying, "Look, here's some certifications that all internal auditors should have," and I first commented, "Well, I guess we're going to have to disagree. While they're great, they're not for everybody." And there's other ones that are more relevant, actually, for a lot of people in the profession. And so, in the thread, people are saying, "Well, what are some of the other options?" So I provided some other options of certifications on cRisk Academy that are relevant to internal auditors. And so the questions, kind of going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And one person, I'm just going to read kind of the comments, and then we're going to break it apart and talk about it, because a lot of the questions and things that are behind the comments are questions that I've received for literally 10 years now. And I keep answering. And so I'm going to do it again today. So, the person responded back and said, "Jason, while these seem great, referring to these other certifications, how are they backed, supported, and recognized by those in the profession? Is being unknown or not supported as a proven cert that adds value to the profession has vetted to be sufficient to support the industry and growth? And until then, not sure it's really relevant. How do you get these types of certs in front of those who hire these professionals and give it the same level of trust?" Lots of reasons they're more academic. So that is referring back to some of the traditional uh, internal audit certifications like CIA that are very academic, not as practical as some of these new ones are. So, lots of reasons they're more academic is the ability to apply to multiple scenarios or companies. If I've only seen apples, I might not recognize a pear tree. Okay, so there's a lot of things in here to kind of go through, which is why I'm doing this video, because I would love to respond back with one sentence, but I wouldn't really answer the person's question. So here we go. So a lot of if we take this apart, there are several different things that this person is bringing up. The first one is what I call old versus new, or something that is established versus something that is new. Okay. And again, I'm talking about this too because this shows some of the critical thinking traps often that people find themselves in, and they don't even realize that they're not thinking about something as critical as they should. So let's talk about this first part, which is old versus new. Okay. And so we'll use an analogy of automobiles. So Ford Motor Company is one of the oldest car companies in the world. Henry Ford was a pioneer in you know creating automobiles, and so they've been around for a long time. People know about Ford, but there are new car companies that have come on the scene over time, right? Like Toyota and Hyundai and some other ones, right? And particularly, let's talk about Tesla. Okay. And again, set aside any personal opinion you may have about Elon Musk, but let's just talk through this using this as an example. So Tesla started making cars, I don't know, a little while ago, right? Obviously, Ford has been in business much longer than Tesla. And so, whenever something new comes out, people kind of look at it and think, well, there's some people who are, hey, this is cool, this is new, I'm going to jump on, the early adopters. And there's other people who are very hesitant. and would say things like, well, Ford's been around for over 100 years and Tesla's only been here for, I don't know, 10 years, whatever it is. And so surely because Ford has been around longer than Tesla, that must mean that Fords are better cars than Teslas. Now, that's a critical thinking error, right? In believing that just because something has been around longer, that it has more value, right? That's not necessarily the case, right? And so let's think this through a little bit, right? Because again, something new comes out, Tesla comes out, electric car. Hey, this is different. And so, what are some ways that we can look at this maybe in a little different way? Well, we could look at it and say, well, okay, Tesla is new, right? But are people buying Teslas? And the answer is yes, right? Has Tesla only been around for a few months or have they been around for many years? Well, they've been around for many years. Okay. So if they've been around for many years, then something must be going on, right? I mean, if they're selling automobiles, then maybe there's something to it. So we can go and we can look at, well, let's look at people who buy Teslas. What do they say about them? Right. And again, if you know anybody who owns a Tesla, and I know several people who own Teslas, they love them, right? They just love their car. And they buy them over and over again. And so we can look at it and say, well, okay, now just a minute. Right. If maybe only five, people had bought Teslas, we may say, well, but I think it's been millions of people now that have bought Teslas. Right. And so you can look at it and say, well, don't just discount something because it's new versus something that's old. Right. This has been a classic trap that has stopped change and progress throughout history. There are many examples of this where people will stomp their feet and say, no, this is what we believe. This is what we have been taught. And so something new cannot be, right? This cannot be true. And so, when you look at it from a certification standpoint, right? The question about, credibility, does it add value? Well, again, the length of time that something has been around doesn't mean that it has value or doesn't have value. Look at it and say, well, okay, if maybe only 5 people had some of these certifications that I've been talking about, then maybe you could say, well, maybe there's not a track record. Just like, again, if Tesla had only sold 1,000 cars, you may look at it and say, well, maybe there's nothing to this. But what if 20,000 people had these certifications? Now, all of a sudden, that's something different, right? And in fact, that's the case, right? So there's a proven track record, right, of this. We can look at it and say, okay, well, what are people saying about it? Right. And again, I know lots of people who have gotten new jobs from using these new certifications. I know that there's testimonials about that, that it actually has helped people in their career. Lots of people talk about them being more practical than some of the other ones and actually being able to help them do their job better. Okay. And so again, don't take my word for it, right? Go look at some of the people that are out there. And so that's kind of this old versus new, right? That again, we need to kind of set that aside and look at the other evidence that's out there critically. Okay. Now, I titled this, others' opinions about certifications don't matter. And again, this is one of the critical things that we end up getting into as humans, because often we want other people's approval. And so we look at other people's opinion and we just believe what other people say, right? And so again, let's use the car example again. I have a brother who believes that Fords are the best cars in the world. In fact, he has only bought Fords for the last 40 years. Now, there is a joke that Ford stands for found on road dead. Okay. Because the reality is, and again, don't believe me, you can go look at something like Consumer Reports. and say Fords are not very reliable, right? They do a good job on their trucks and their commercial vehicles, but their passenger cars, not so reliable, right? Now, it doesn't matter what I say. I could show my brother the Consumer Reports. I can talk to him until I am blue in the face, but he will not change his opinion, right? Because he believes that Fords are the only vehicles to buy. Now, for myself, I don't buy Fords, right? Instead, I have looked at the information and I have determined what is best for me. If I just listened to my brother's opinion, then I would only buy Fords. But I didn't, right? I did my own research, I did my own due diligence, and I tend to buy Toyotas, right? So for the last probably 20 years, I have bought Toyotas primarily. I've also had some other ones. I have a Mercedes as well, but it's me doing the research and me looking at it and saying, I don't need a big pickup truck. If I needed a pickup truck, then maybe I would consider a Ford, but I don't need a pickup truck. And for me, what's more important is instead of, relying on a company that's 100 years old for making my decision on which vehicle to purchase, what's more important to me is the reliability, the way I feel in it, right? The way that if it's practical, right, for what I need it to do. I don't need a pickup truck, but I do need my vehicle to do certain things, things that are right for me. And so, because of that, right, I consciously choose to buy what I buy. And I don't care that my brother thinks I'm an idiot for buying something other than a Ford. Okay, so how does this relate to certifications? Well, there are some people out there who think the CIA is the only certification you can get. It's the certification that has been around the longest. It's the one that is approved by the IIA. Well, of course, it's approved by the IIA because they're the ones who are selling it, right? And so there's some people who will always think that way, and that's great. If that's what they think, then let them do that. But what I'm asking you to consider is do your own research and decide what's actually best for you. Because what I find is a lot of people just believe the opinions of other people. They go down a certification path of getting the CIA and they spend years and tens of thousands of dollars trying to get it. And it's not necessarily the best thing for their career, right? Remember yesterday I told you about the person who was an audit leader who was still thinking that, he needed to get the CIA. That's not where he's at in his career, right? Something else would be much better for him than spending more time away from his family, more money in order to try to get the CIA. Now, this also brings up something else, which is, again, a lot of people trying to rely on the opinions of others. And so I've had several people, and it's kind of embedded in this comment, but that will come back and say, well, who accredits your certification? Who backs your certification, right? Because they believe that if there's some big name behind it or somebody who's accredited it, that is what gives the certification value. But again, that's not what gets the certification value. The value is in whether or not it will help you do your job. The value is in whether or not it will help you get a job, right? And I've talked about this in other videos before. I've even had some people that ask me a very silly question, and they say, does the IIA back or endorse cRisk Academy certifications? Now, on its surface, it may seem like, well, I want to make sure that the IIA is okay with this. Well, that would be like going to Tesla and saying, hey, Tesla, you're making cars, but I want you to tell me whether or not Ford endorses your cars. That's a really silly question, isn't it? Can you imagine Ford Motor Company coming out with a public statement and saying, there's this new car company called Tesla, and we think they make pretty good cars. So we think you should consider buying a Tesla instead of a Ford. Well, they would never do that. Why? Because Ford wants to sell Ford cars. They don't want people buying Teslas, even if a Tesla is the right car for someone. Just like the IIA doesn't want you buying anything other than the certifications they provide. It's just business, right? And so, again, something to think about. Now, this whole idea of, lots of reasons they are more academic is the ability to apply to multiple scenarios or companies. And so, again, it's a quick discounting of, the fact that something that is practical couldn't apply to all organizations. But again, that's a fallacy, right? The fact that a modern certification that is more topical in nature still relates to different companies, right? Again, if you're looking at something like agile auditing, well, that agile auditing information is relevant regardless of the industry you're in, regardless of the company that you're in, right? And so it can be something that is practical but still applies to every organization, right? And so that's not something really to consider. Now, this whole idea of apples and the pear tree, and I understand this, right, is, as we've talked about earlier on in this video, uh, here's the equivalent, right, is that many organizations, many hiring managers in the job description say, Jason, in order to work here, or in my job description of this particular position, I want you to bring me a piece of fruit, right? You need to have a piece of fruit in order to do the job. And so again, here, piece of fruit equals certification, right? So I want you to bring me a piece of fruit, right? You need to have fruit in order to do this job. Okay, right? And so some hiring managers will say, and the only fruit that you can bring me is apples, because apples are the only fruit that I think have any value in the world. That would be pretty silly to say, wouldn't it? Right? Because there's lots of other fruit out there besides apples. There's oranges, there's bananas, there's pears, there's kumquats, right? There's all kinds of different fruit that are out there. And so is the requirement to bring fruit, or is the requirement you have to have an apple, right? And so, some people look at that and say, well, you need to convince the people who only want apples that it's okay for me to bring a banana. Now, I'm not here to convince anyone of anything, right? Again, as I told you, like my brother with Fords versus Toyotas or anything else, I will never be able to convince him that any other car is worth its salt. It's only Fords for him, right? And so let's think about that from a job market perspective. You don't need to convince a hiring manager. You don't need to convince an organization who is so narrow-minded that they believe apples are the only thing you can have. In fact, that's not a place I would want to work, right? So if you have someone who is so narrow-minded in thinking that the only fruit of value is an apple, it's probably not a place that you want to work anyway. Now, for the idea of, hey, maybe people don't know about this, right? Because, how do you get it in front of those who hire professionals and give it the same level of trust? Again, it's not about convincing people, but let me give you a scenario, right? Is if in my job description I say, you need to bring me a piece of fruit, and I look at your resume and you don't have apple on it, but you have this thing called a kumquat. And I'm like, that's really interesting. I've never heard of a kumquat before, but it sounds pretty interesting. Tell me more, right? I'm going to interview you. I want to know what kumquat is and how that kumquat actually helps you in doing the job that we require of having a piece of fruit, right? And so what it does is it's not about convincing the people, but it's about having something on your resume that invites curiosity. So again, if I am hiring for a head of internal audit and I'm the hiring manager, or I'm the HR person who's looking at the resumes, and everybody that is on there has CIA, right? Well, that doesn't make any of those people different than the other people. But if a couple of them have something else on there like certified chief audit executive, hmm, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. You're different than everyone else. I want to interview you because you're different than everyone else, right? Or, hey, this person has certificate in internal audit management. Hey, that's interesting. Most other people don't have that, right? Tell me more, right? Those are the kinds of organizations that you want to work for anyway, right? And again, they're things that can be verified, right? And so that kind of gets to the pears and the other fruit kind of discussion here. Okay, so let me kind of just look back here again, make sure that I kind of answered the questions. Um, so really, and again, the idea here is, do your own research. Don't just rely on other people. Don't just believe that because, more people have a certain certification that means it adds more value, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that, right? And what's more important is that you choose wisely for your career. So if you want to get the CIA, get the CIA. If you want to get the CISA, get the CISA. If you want to get the CFE, get the CFE. If you want to be a CPA, get a CPA, right? That's your choice. But what I want you to do is go into it, right, having logically thought it out. And as I said, for most people that do some of these traditional certifications, it literally takes them years and thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars of time, money, and energy to get the certification. Now, what if instead you could get something in a month or two, right? Would that be a better route for you? Do you not want to have to spend as much time studying, time away from your family, time away from your job in order to have a certification? It's up to you, right? If you want to get a certified risk-based internal auditor, if you want to be a certified practitioner in internal audit, if you want to become a certified chief audit executive, if you want to be a certified agile auditing professional, right? These are some examples of other things that are out there. There are other fruits that are out there. Because guess what? I don't particularly like apples in general. Okay. It's just not a fruit that I eat. I actually get a little bit of an allergic reaction to it. And so I choose to eat different fruit. And it's okay to choose different fruit. And again, you don't have to believe me, but I'm telling you that a lot of these traditional certifications take years. I'll give you another example that came from this morning. Okay. I had somebody who registered for a CIA Part 1 training in 2018. Someone who registered in 2018. Now it's 2025. That means this was 7 years ago. 7 years ago. And they were inquiring about, well, I want to get back into my training now. And so, can you help me log into my account? So that means that this person has been working on or has put aside the CIA for seven years. Okay. So if you want to go down that route, if you want to spend years getting certifications, that's fine. It's up to you. For those of you that want something that is quicker, that is a less time investment, less cost investment, less energy investment, that still gets you results, that's more practical, that's something you can put on your resume that separates you from other people, I would think that you would want to consider some of the other options, cRisk Academy or other things in general, right? I mean, again, it's if depending on your technical area, what you do, other certifications that I'm not even mentioning may be more relevant for you, like anti-money laundering, something around cybersecurity and specific, things around data analytics, other things like that, right? But ultimately, sit down and think about what's going to be best for your career based on what you need to be successful. Don't worry about what others' opinions about certifications are. Just do what is best for you. Because at the end of the day, others' opinions don't matter. My opinions don't matter, right? You may have watched this whole video and thought, Jason, you are full of garbage. That's okay, right? Again, some of these things are my opinions based on my experience over decades, right? And so I have a certain viewpoint. You may have a different viewpoint, and that's just fine, right? So, anyway, hopefully that helps answer some of these questions and, helps you in deciding what is best for you. So, thanks for listening, and I will see you on the next video.